All my life, I've been a global traveler, seeking cultures and traditions that are just as vibrant today as in times past. We're opening doors, stepping into worlds most never see, because that's where the best stories are. We're sharing tales of local life and the working world, plus spending time with some of the most interesting people you'd ever want to meet. It's truly privileged access that always leaves me excited to explore more. In this episode of Exploring More with Karina, we're celebrating a day that is very special to anyone with a connection to Norway. 17. Mai, the 17th of May, Norwegian Constitution Day, with short films that highlight some of my favorite things about Norway. It's food, art, music, our iconic sweaters, and much, much more. Join me now in Norway so I can share with you some of the best of my homeland.
In the 8th century, the world faced a new naval power. The Vikings, who set out from Scandinavia in search of adventure, conquests, and knowledge. Envied as explorers and feared as invaders, the Vikings stretched their reach to the edge of the known world and beyond. They built an empire on the back of a key piece of technology: the sleek, agile longship. The longships employed an innovative clinker-built hull where the planks overlap each other. The design was flexible, required less water displacement, and was extremely stable, thanks to its unique keel configuration.
You have the keel to support when you're sailing, but this here have an extra keel who is built in the hull. You start with the keel, you continue with 6 planks, which is going up like to make the bottom, and the 7th board stay vertical.
And that's this one here?
That's one, yeah. So therefore when you sail, you get 1 extra keel who support you for the direction. After that, it's continue, flat again, and go to the upper strike.
So it's sort of like a triple keel?
Yes, triple keel. More stable for sailing.
With the longships, the Vikings were able to cover vast distances quickly, mastering both open seas and shallow rivers. They sailed to Britain and France, to America, through the rivers of Russia and Ukraine to Istanbul, and even to distant Egypt. Elements of the impressive longships were adopted wherever the Vikings sailed. You can still see the influences today in Portugal's Rabeio boats and the gondolas of Venice. To give me a better sense of what it took to actually build a longship, Geir walked me through some of the early stages and explained the importance of choosing just the right tree.
When we try to split it, sometimes if the trunk is really good, then we can split this for a half hour in 2 pieces. But in worst case, it can take 3 days.
An expert like Geir can read the flow of the tree, which is extremely important to maximize the yield.
When we split this timber, we split it in the marrow lines. We first split in 2 pieces like this, and so in 4, so in 8, and so in 16 pieces.
The process of extracting those planks is really straightforward, but it isn't easy.
Now you shall get the honor.
Good.
Yes,
hey, I'm getting the hang of this.
Yes, you're strong also.
Yeah, I'm a Viking.
Slowly, just as Geir predicted, the tree began to open.
You can see the little crack, and I follow this marrow line here now. Now you can see it's follow the marrow line down to the center of the tree.
Then it's time to turn the sections into planks. Another extremely labor-intensive task that required every available Viking. This large plank is then marked and split into smaller boards that are lashed to the ship's skeleton with whale baleen, a part of the whale's mouth used to strain krill from the sea. It made a strong yet flexible binder.
They make it to these strips, and then they binding it between this 2 hole here,
Yeah.
2 hole here
Yes,
in the
right.
frame,
Yeah.
and they just saw it like this.
To prevent leaking, a coat of thick tar and wool rope were placed between each side plank. These planks are also riveted together using iron nails.
When you do it this way, you can see then you get flexible construction, and you can see this here is possible to move a little.
Yeah.
It don't fight against the waves. They cooperate with them and just fall a little bit off.
The world's fascination with the Viking longships has never waned. They've been studied endlessly at locations throughout Scandinavia and the rest of the world. Most famous is the Oseberg, on display at Oslo's Viking Ship Museum. A vessel so treasured, the new Oseberg Ship Foundation spent years building an exact replica to breathe new life into this ancient form. In 2012, this legendary ship was reborn. Known as Saga Oseberg, every inch, curve and angle of the original was faithfully reproduced. Today she's a window into the Viking Age and the technology that literally reshaped the world. The iconic Viking longships remain one of the most recognized and admired ship designs ever created. A vivid symbol of exploration and discovery. Ask any schoolchild which European first set foot in America, and you'll probably get this answer. It was Christopher Columbus in 1492. But this is not correct, for we now know that another great explorer achieved this historic feat some 500 years earlier. That explorer was a Viking called Leif Erikson. This was the age when the Vikings ruled. They were brave, bold, and adventurous, and lived in the countries we now know as Scandinavia. One of them was Leif Erikson, himself the son of another intrepid explorer, Eric the Red. Eric was born on the west coast of Norway. His nickname of Eric the Red probably refers to the color of his hair. He had already spent some years in Iceland, but in the year 982 AD, he led an expedition to a new territory, establishing a settlement there that would last for hundreds of years. Eric the Red called this new land Greenland. He figured that giving it an attractive name would make it seem like a desirable place to live. When Eric had a son, he was called Leif Erikson, in keeping with the Viking tradition of adding the word son to the father's name. But Leif inherited more than just his father's name. He had adventure and exploration in his blood. Furthermore, his father taught him the necessary skills to be an explorer, leadership and navigation. And so it was that at the age of 25, Leif Erikson set sail with a crew of 35 men to explore the seas even further to the west, going well beyond Greenland. He was sailing through uncharted waters without maps or a compass. This would be a journey of unrivaled discovery, and one that would take its leader to immortality. Eventually, Erikson landed in a place he called Vinland, and Vinland was part of what we now call North America. Erikson's achievement was celebrated for hundreds of years in Norse legends and stories, but many people doubted that it had really happened. Was it true that a Viking could have beaten Columbus by 500 years? Doubts about Eriksson's discovery were finally dispelled in 1960. That was when the modern-day explorers Helge and Anne Ingstad identified a Norse settlement at the northern tip of Newfoundland in what is now Canada. The site at Lance aux Meadows has the remains of 9 houses that are unmistakably Nordic in their design. Helge and Anne Ingstad also established that the remains dated back from around 1000 AD, exactly the time that Eriksson's voyage had taken place. And they found artifacts on the site which further prove the truth of Eriksson's story. So Leif Erikson has now taken his rightful place in world history. In the United States, his achievement is commemorated every year on October 9th, and statues celebrating the great explorer can be found in many American cities. For it does indeed seem to be true. Leif Erikson, the Viking, was the first European to set foot in America. In 1360, seafarers arriving in Bergen were greeted by a new landmark. A line of distinctive buildings built by the Hanseatic League, a powerful trading network that dominated Northern Europe and the Baltics. Their arrival forever changed the course of the city.
This was really an international city for so many hundreds of years because of the Hanseatic League. They came with their knowledge and they really helped sell our goods as far down as Africa.
The area is commonly known as the Brygge, which means the pier, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A great spot to explore is the Hanseatic Museum. It provides a glimpse into life behind the facades, revealing a place where 2,000 German traders lived and worked in what was almost a country within a city.
It's also full of fun surprises, like this cupboard door is actually the secret entrance to the merchant's second bedroom.
This allowed him plenty of room for his more private affairs. With power came privilege, and it was exercised often.
They had their own rules and custom deals with the king. They didn't pay as much tax. They didn't have to do any service in the military. They talked German. They followed German laws, even though they were living in Bergen.
The Hanseatic League cast a long shadow in Bergen, thriving for nearly 400 years. And legend has it, some of the members may still be calling the Brygge district home. You see,
There's even a haunted room here, if you believe in that kind of thing.
Bergen is a delightful city. Let us share with you the cultural treasures of our beautiful homeland. From 1537 to 1814, Norway was the lesser partner in a dynastic union with Denmark. This period of time saw Norway's cultural and political influence erode as artists and intellectuals continually emigrated to Copenhagen, the seat of power to the south. Danish became the shared language between the two nations, and the majority of political decisions invariably favored the crown over its more far-flung constituents. Things changed, however, toward the end of the Napoleonic Wars, during which Denmark was forced to cede Norway to the King of Sweden, paving the way for Norway's independence. Following the signing of the nation's democratic constitution, on May 17, 1814, Norway gained control of its domestic affairs, while foreign affairs were controlled by Sweden under a shared monarch, King Oscar II. With independence from Denmark came a new interest in a uniquely Norwegian identity among the nation's artists, composers, writers, and scholars, who in turn idealized rural and folk life, where such an identity could be found. This movement to collect and celebrate what it meant to be Norwegian came to be known as Norwegian National Romanticism, Norsk Folkeromantikk. Fairy tales, folk songs, dances, and traditional dress all attained elevated status in the collective imagination. So too did the unique grandeur of the land, in particular Norway's majestic mountains and fjords. In total, the movement inspired creative breakthroughs in art, music, literature, architecture, and even linguistics. Norwegian national romanticism lasted for about half a century and contributed to Norway's independence movement, which ultimately led to the peaceful dissolution of the union with Sweden in 1905. Diverging political views between the people of Norway and the Crown of Sweden led the Norwegian Parliament to declare full independence on June 7th, and King Oscar became the last king of unified Norway and Sweden. Subsequently, the Norwegian government identified Prince Carl of Denmark as a candidate for the Norwegian throne, largely because he descended from Norwegian kings. He agreed to accept only if he was chosen by popular vote and called for a referendum, where he achieved a 79% vote of confidence. As homage to his new country, he took the Old Norse name of Håkon. And upon swearing in as King Håkon VII, he became the first independent king of Norway in 518 years, and one of the world's few elected monarchs. One of Norway's cultural icons is the bunad, costumes that first flourished during the 19th century national romanticism movement, when Norwegians, in search of a national identity after centuries of Danish rule, thoroughly embraced all things uniquely Norwegian. Art, literature, and the distinctive character of folk attire worn by rural people. Today there are over 200 regional bunads.
There are different bunads for each part of the country. Even each region has their own bunad.
There is an unwritten law that either you have to come from the place where the bunad come from, or your parents or at least your grandparents have some sort of relationship with the area.
Bunads vary greatly from place to place. One factor is the use of local materials, but another major influence came from beyond Norway.
Back a couple of hundred years, we had the traveling merchants coming to the remote valleys here in Norway, from France, from Belgium, from Germany. One guy went up one valley with his suitcase, another guy up another valley with his suitcase. So we can actually link the various types of bunads here in Norway today to various places down in Europe.
While bunads are made for both men and women, the female bunad is more ornate. The intricate designs are specific to the region where the bunad is created, with each detail telling its own story. So the bunad speaks volumes if you know how to read it.
Each type of silver belongs to a specific type of bunad. And when you have a closer look, you can see on the bunad whether the lady is a married person or not yet married.
That task was much easier in centuries past, when the hat or scout made the woman's status clear. The bunad grew into a Norwegian cultural icon thanks to three key women. Hulda Garborg, along with Clara Sem, praised the bunad as they strove to preserve local cultures. But it was the third woman, Norway's Queen Maud, who changed everything in 1906. When she received a Hardanger bunad from the women of Odda and began wearing it to official international events. The rest, as they say, is history. Her bunad became known as the Nasjonalen, and Norwegians soon began wearing their bunads to all types of special events. In recent decades, the bunad has grown even more popular, and it's now seen regularly at important occasions. Viking godmother Trude Drevland wore her Bergen bunad when she named the Viking star. And ever since, the bunad has become a bit of a favorite among our godmothers. I also proudly wore mine as godmother of the beautiful Viking Sea. For most events, the bunad is a choice. But there's one day it's a must. On On May 17th, Norway's Constitution Day, the bunad is a symbol of patriotism.
You are celebrating your country's freedom. There is the bunad, there is the shirt ironed, there is all the silver laying there, and I feel proud, so proud.
Norwegians treasure their freedom, and the 17th of May is an annual outpouring of joy and appreciation unlike anywhere else. A celebration with the iconic bunad at its heart.
The highlight of wearing a bunad, that is our national day, the 17th of May. You will see thousands and thousands of bunads. We wear it with great pride, proud of our country and the values we have here in Norway.
Norway is a land rich in culture and traditions. I hope you'll go out and explore her many treasures. The 19th century brought Norway its first star. The man was Ole Bull, who delighted in squeezing every last drop of potential from his beloved violin.
Ole Bull was a unique musician. He could do things on violins which no other person could do. It's really difficult music, and that's why much of his music has not been played for, I think, 100 years.
A man of overwhelming confidence and charisma, Ole Bull took a most unusual path to greatness. Though already playing at age 5, he struggled with formal education.
It was said that Ole Bull was self-taught, but he had good teachers. The problem was that Ole Bull didn't want to learn so much. He wanted to invent it himself.
Full of curiosity, Bull challenged every aspect of music, even the fundamental design of the violin.
He did a lot of modifications on his instruments. He flattened the bridge and the fingerboard to be able to play all 4 strings at the same time, which is totally impossible on a regular instrument. So he would play like... only that he would play all strings at the same time. Now we have to cheat and kind of make it bounce from string to string, but he played all the strings at the same time.
Because that's a regular violin has a bowed.
Yeah.
The
so
4 strings are bowed.
He didn't make it totally flat, but he made it more flat, and also had a longer bow, and maybe made it a little bit softer, so he would be able to reach all the strings.
Ole Bull mesmerized Europe, playing hundreds of concerts a year to packed houses. Yet he was never satisfied and searched constantly for ways to make the music even better.
He ruined a lot of fantastic instruments. He had some beautiful Guarneri instruments that he totally ruined. He caved out from beneath the wood until he went through it, you know. He was always in search of the perfect tone.
In his relentless quest to be recognized as the world's premier virtuoso violinist, Ole Bull was always creative, at times taking extreme measures to put his talent on display.
He went up to the highest mountain in Norway to play, and in 1876 he was playing on the top of the pyramid in Egypt.
From the capitals of Europe to Cuba and America, Ole Bull left his audiences spellbound. But music revealed just one side of this complex man. The French Revolution awakened another, his deep longing for an independent Norway.
All the musicians were fleeing, but Ole Bull, he was going in to see the revolution. He was inspired to make a revolution in Norway.
Ole Bull championed the cause throughout his life. He promoted Norwegian culture too, integrating folk songs into his music and writing themes inspired by Norway's natural beauty.
Ole Bull loved the nature of Norway. You can find that in his music. You can find the sunshine, you can find the thunder, you can find the mountains. He was a very passionate man.
His sanctuary while in Norway was the quiet island of Lysøyen. and the estate remains little changed. Located just outside Bergen, Villa Lysøen offers a fascinating window into the life of this legendary man. The villa reflects his love for the many cultures through which he travelled during his career, and the nature in which he wrapped himself while at home. Ole Bull is just one of Norway's many cultural treasures. We look forward to sharing our beautiful homeland with you. Majestic scenes on canvas, local culture, music and traditions. In the 19th century, Norwegian Romanticism set out to preserve these elements of national identity. This patriotic movement inspired the imaginations of all Norwegians, including Edvard Grieg, who painted the essence of Norway with music, often incorporating elements of folk songs and always displaying Norway's wildness.
You can hear that he's either on the top of some mountains or he has his back to the mountains and looks out to the sea.
Grieg's love of nature led him to create his own sanctuary, Trollhaugen. In this tranquil setting, his spirit and creativity soared.
Grieg needed to be in the nature. He composed barely nothing when he was in a city.
Grieg spent summers amid this beauty with his wife Nina always at his side, writing fresh and intriguing compositions to take on tour once the snows began to fall.
The winter season Grieg spent down in Europe, and of course he met a lot of influential people there, and he invited them to come back to see him in Norway during the summer. They brought their wives, their children, even their servants.
Grieg's escape was the tiny composer's hut, a place of solitude where he spent countless hours breathing life into notes on paper.
He left his guests in the morning after breakfast and went down there and worked, coming up only for meals. So he wasn't that social with his guests after inviting them.
Today, the composer's hut appears virtually unchanged and includes a subtle reminder that while Grieg is remembered as larger than life, he was actually quite a diminutive man.
When he composed down at the studio, there was an upright, normal piano, and to sit right at the piano, he needed to sit on something. And he used to sit on the collected piano sonatas of Beethoven. Luckily for Grieg and us, Beethoven composed 32 sonatas, so it's a fairly thick book.
Edvard Grieg spent 22 summers creating masterpieces while wrapped in the beauty of Trollhaugen. And one wonders what would have come of the man without the place.
Grieg referred to Trollhaugen, his home, as his best opus. It really reflects his personality. You can play Grieg's music everywhere, but the atmosphere, the idea of this man who built the house, that is something that you only can find within these walls. To be here and hear the music where it was created, it's really special.
Edvard Grieg left an amazing musical legacy, and we look forward to sharing with you more about the man and his gift. For Norwegian Roald Amundsen, failure was not an option. Already famous for sailing through the Northwest Passage from the Canadian Arctic to the Pacific, that victory was not enough. Amundsen began planning an expedition to the North Pole, and in 1907 he asked his idol, Fridtjof Nansen, if he could borrow from the ship that Nansen had taken into the Arctic. Unlike other boats, Fram would respond to sideways pressure by being pushed upwards, rising out of the pack to sit above the ice. Amundsen planned and calculated every aspect of the expedition with only the vision of success in mind. In 1909, he was completing his plans to drift to the North Pole in the ice pack when the news was broadcast across the world: the North Pole is reached. The American Commander Robert Peary had reached it by dog sled. Why would he want to go north now? Even if he reached the North Pole, there would be no prize in coming second. There was only one trophy left, the South Pole. At once, Amundsen switched targets and began to plan for a trip south, though he never told anyone except for 2 or 3 of his closest associates. Even Nansen wasn't told. Shackleton had reached within 100 miles of it the year before. Robert Scott was preparing for another attempt. The urge to tell Nansen must have been immense, but what if Nansen refused to lend Fram for a journey that he himself was preparing to travel? Amundsen chose not to take the risk. Fram left the Oslo fjord on 7th of June 1910. Before she sailed, the King and Queen of Norway visited her, carrying the hopes of so many Norwegians. Nansen watched him sail away from the quay with Amundsen on the bridge. Despite his kindness, he said it was the bitterest hour of my life. As far as everyone knew, Amundsen was starting another Arctic expedition. Only 4 of his crew knew the truth: Amundsen himself, his second-in-command Captain Nilsen, and the 2 first officers, one of whom was Lieutenant Prestrud. In Madeira, Amundsen revealed the truth. He was travelling south, not north. His goal was the South Pole. He even sent a cable to Captain Scott in Melbourne. It read simply, "I'm going south. Stop. Amundsen, stop." The race was on. In January 1911, Amundsen and his crew disembarked the Fram on the Ross Ice Barrier, now called the Ross Ice Shelf, 788 miles from the South Pole. In this, Amundsen was taking a huge risk. Unlike Scott, who was heading along a route already attempted by Shackleton, Amundsen planned to beat him by venturing into the unknown. Another difference between the 2 explorers was their chosen draft animals. Scott chose ponies. Amundsen chose Greenland Eskimo dogs. He calculated that besides speed, dogs had other advantages. Beyond the Ross Ice Barrier was a range of mountains rising to more than 10,000 feet that dogs could climb and ponies could not. There was another important factor. Each dog was a mobile store of fresh meat, to be killed and eaten when the time came. To Amundsen, the strategist, the planner, there was nothing cruel in the idea of slaughtering the weakest animals to provide fresh food for the remainder and the men. But there wasn't a man who was not revolted by the prospect of shooting the dogs. How close to the ship Amundsen could erect their base on the ice barrier was critical. Too close to the sea and the shelf ice would carve and drift away. Too far away and they would lose precious time transporting supplies to the camp, the Framheim, the village under the ice. Yet Amundsen had planned for this, and his judgment on where to set up camp proved correct. He planned to set out for the pole in September as soon as spring came. There was no risk that Scott could set off before that. By the 27th of August, they were ready to start on the last 788 miles of the long journey. The men were healthy. Amundsen, with his capacity for attention to detail that so often marks the difference between success and failure, had calculated what types and quantities of food would be necessary. After 15 miles, however, bad weather forced him to return to camp. The temperature fell from 8 degrees centigrade to below 49 degrees centigrade. "The breath of men and dogs freezes the moment it hits the air," wrote Amundsen. After the false start, Amundsen waited a month before leaving with a smaller party. Along with 4 sleds, he took Bjørland, Hassel, Wisting and Hansen. "The dogs were magnificent," wrote Amundsen, twisting and turning their way through the mountains across a maze of crevasses. There were steep descents to negotiate as well as climbs. The drops were sometimes terrifying. In 4 days, Amundsen had brought the whole expedition up 11,000 feet of frozen rock and ice, sleds, dogs and men. They estimated they were 6 days ahead of schedule and would have believed they had a very real chance to beating Scott. They made camp on 20th of November at a place that Amundsen had named Butchers. This was where they were going to kill the dogs. After shooting the 24 weakest dogs, they abandoned one of the sleds and divided the remaining 18 dogs into 3 teams of 6. But just as they were about to depart, the weather turned. The wind transformed the snow into a solid, blinding wall. There was no chance of getting through. They sat in the tent for 4 days. On the 5th day, they could no longer bear the delay. They agreed that it was better to brave the blizzards and make even just a little progress rather than stay put. The wind roared, piercing the skin through cracks in their clothes. The dogs were covered in snow and refused to move. When they did finally set forth, the whole plain ahead was a blanket of drifting snow that covered everything in its path. It was sheer madness, said Amundsen. We were running blind over unknown ground. I was afraid we might fall into a chasm before we could pull up. On 8th of December, they arrived at the farthest point reached by Shackleton 3 years earlier. Latitude 88 degrees, 23 minutes south. No one had ventured beyond. No other moment on the whole journey moved me as much as this, said Amundsen. The weather changed dramatically. With bright sunshine and blue skies, their spirits lifted, and it all seemed to have been worth it. The painful sores on the faces, the blistered feet, none of it mattered in comparison to the incredible achievement that was now within their grasp. It was like being a boy again, said Amundsen. Their sled meters ticked off the miles, 9, 10, 11, 12, and at last 15. They paused. Could it be true? Amundsen carefully checked the meters and took sextant readings. They had arrived. At 3 p.m. on 14th of December 1911, they had reached the South Pole. They had beaten Scott by 35 days. They each put a hand around the flagpole made of ski sticks, bearing the Norwegian flag, and pushed it into the ground. Amundsen called the area King Haakon VII Plateau, after the King of Norway. He wrote a note for Scott, asking him to give a message to the king in case he didn't survive the return journey. Along with the note, he put letters from his companions, a pair of mittens, and a spare sextant in a bag, and hung it inside a small tent. Scott would no doubt find them. They surely knew how hard that discovery would be. The men stood together, bareheaded, staring up at the red flag with the white cross and the blue cross over the white. Then they turned north again for their camp, Framheim. They had conquered the South Pole. They had done this for Norway and also for themselves. Amundsen returned to Norway in 1913 after a stay in South America, where he wrote The South Pole, his account of the expedition. Scott's party reached the pole on 17th of January 1912, only to discover that Amundsen had beaten them to it. They began the long 1,500-kilometer journey back, but they never made it. Scott and 2 of his men died of starvation and exposure in their tent on the 29th of March, just 20 kilometers from a supply depot. At the time, Amundsen's monumental achievement in reaching the pole was overshadowed by the tragedy of Scott's expedition. Amundsen was regarded by some as cold and calculating. Yet it was precisely Amundsen's careful planning, calculated risks, attention to detail, and need for secrecy that were the reasons for his success, notwithstanding his courage. In Amundsen's words, "Victory awaits him who has everything in order. Luck, we call it. Defeat is definitely due for him who has neglected to take the necessary precautions. Bad luck, we call it." In all the world, there's one haunting image that grips us like no other. Art you can feel but not explain. The painting is The Scream by Norway's Edvard Munch.
I think that the reason Edvard Munch means so much to so many people all over the world is because he is dealing with existential and fundamental aspects of what it is to be a human being.
Through art, Munch overcame a childhood of poverty and poor health, and became a pioneer of the expressionist movement. His intriguing works reflected the turbulent world swirling around him. The thought-provoking, often torturous art, speaking with a voice that is impossible to ignore.
He's dealing with disease, jealousy, melancholia, all kinds of emotional and difficult problems that you have to deal with as a human being, choices that you have to make.
Much of Munch's art remains misunderstood. A vivid example is the painting many call Vampire. The real title is Love and Pain, depicting a woman consoling her lover. Despite a life of controversy and personal struggles, Edvard Munch persevered.
Edvard Munch actually produced all his life. He was an artist more than 60 years. Scream is a powerful work, one of the most known works in the world, but he has other very, very strong works as well.
Munch was extremely prolific, and the extent of his works is actually difficult to grasp. In all, he produced more than 40,000 pieces of art that included paintings, photography, woodcuts, and even lithographs and etchings. While creating art was his passion, letting go of what he called his children was another matter. After Munch's death, more than 20,000 pieces of art were discovered at his studio, and they now reside at the Munch Museum in Oslo.
As director of the Munch Museum in Oslo, I'd like to welcome the Viking guests to our museum. It's probably the biggest one-artist museum in the world, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this day, and I look so much forward to see you here in Oslo.
Edvard Munch is a priceless part of Norway's culture and traditions. We look forward to sharing with you our country's many treasures. Tucked away deep in the Norwegian fjordland is the small town of Aurland. It's home to something you wouldn't expect: a shoe factory. It was the vision of a young Nils Tveranger. He launched his shoe in 1908, and it soon won the first prize at the National Fair. Aurland's shoe industry boomed, once supporting 19 companies. Now there's just one, built on an iconic Tveranger design.
Most people in the world know what the penny loafer is, but most of us don't know that they actually come from Norway, and this is the original penny loafer.
This is the original penny loafer. It was designed by my great-grandfather back in the late 1920s.
And how did it become a penny loafer, or a Norwegian as some people refer to it as?
Back in 1934, there was 2 American journalists visiting this area, and they write about everything. The nature, the sea, the fjords, but also the shoemaking. And they go back to USA and printed the article. The Bass company, George Henry Bass, liked what he saw and copied it back in 1936 and called it Norwegians, after Norwegians.
So the word Norwegians comes from Norwegians. So he's sort of crediting Norway for his invention. For his inspired invention.
Inspiring.
Norwegians built a loyal following in America and eventually became a huge hit on college campuses, especially with women who preferred Norwegians to high heels. While the shoe has become a long-standing favorite, most people aren't aware that the unique front design actually played an important role in Norway's World War II history.
Back between 1940 and 1945, the Second World War, the Norwegian paper, they used a paperclip in the collar.
To recognize each other?
Yes, and as a symbol of resistance. But they also used a Norwegian øre, 1/10 of a krone.
So they put the 1/10 of the kroner into the little pocket here.
It's been said some Americans, inspired by the story, placed pennies in their Norwegians, and the penny loafer was born. While the tools may have changed, the focus on artistry and craftsmanship remains strong.
Today, 5 people sit and hand produce every one of these shoes.
So everything we do is kind of limited edition.
Aurlandskoen has successfully fought back mass production by returning to its roots. Reimagining Tveranger's legendary design in smart and often whimsical ways.
they're actually properly paired.
Yeah, that's port and starboard.
So this is a cheat sheet for those who are trying to take their boat license.
Yes.
Öland Shoe Factory is like no other, right down to its one-of-a-kind view. Norway is a wonderfully diverse country with much to discover. We look forward to sharing with you more of our homeland. Norway's rugged coastal mountains are a seemingly endless maze of steep fjords and narrow valleys. Many hold fascinating stories, like the Bergsdalen Valley, where wool and knitwear maker Dale sprang to life in 1879.
A businessman called Jepsen. He was a textile engineer and he had studied all the new machines. He came with machines with a boat from the fjords. They transported it up and they started the factory here.
Drawn by one of Norway's most abundant resources, hydropower, plus easy access to wool, Dale thrived. The village grew quickly and entire families began honing their skills, creating a vast pool of knowledge that never left.
This is nice with this company. Generations have worked here. People here, they really know what they're doing. They inherited a lot of competence that you cannot find anywhere. It's just they know how to do it nice.
It's the tiny twist. It's the little things that makes us different. We have to be on top on the quality side of things to be able to call ourselves Dale with pride. That's the core of what Dale has always been about.
It's like making the nicest wine in France. You know, this is something you cannot always understand because it's so inherited how you do it right.
Dale was quite successful from the beginning, but really took off in 1956 when the company began outfitting the national Norwegian ski team.
This is what have made us very well known abroad, because they always came with a new Dale Norway sweater for every World Championship, every Olympic. And in the end, the International Olympic Committee wanted us to make sweaters for them. So we have had like official sweaters for the Olympics and World Championships since 1956.
While the Norwegian ski team introduced Dale to the world, it's the unwavering commitment to innovative, enduring wool and knitwear that set Dale apart.
Everyone that knows Dale Norway, they know the products are very long-lasting. We only use 100% wool, and we find the finest qualities of wool. We use Norwegian wool that is very, very long-lasting, or we use a more softer merino or also merino cashmere. It's really beautiful quality.
The designs often draw inspiration from Norway's distant past. Times when every pattern was a reflection of nature or a symbol of great significance.
You have a lot of stories around the different designs. Knitwears, for example, if you see some of the crosses, it's like protection from the evil that they put in to their fishermen or their farmers' garments to protect them. So it's a long, long tradition.
The Dale commitment to Norwegian culture and tradition was critical when Viking decided to create a sweater for men and a comfy cardigan for women.
For Viking, we wanted to do something very special, something very Nordic, built upon the Nordic traditions. It's great to be able to tell a story through the garments. That's why we went all the way to the Viking Museum in Oslo and looked down into what they found on board of the Viking ships. The different textiles that were found on the Oseberg ship, they derive from around 800. I looked a lot into the different patterns that they used here and tried to take some of them out and then combine them in a different way.
Beyond these fresh interpretations of traditional patterns, elements from history and legend were also infused into the Viking garments.
We used this old Viking brooch as an inspiration for the zipper puller and also for the buttons. And for the masculine version, we use the Thor's hammer as a zipper puller. The Thor's hammer is from the Norse mythology. He used his hammer to make the thunder and lightning.
The true beauty of Dale knitwear lies not only in their appearance, but in their usefulness.
Dale Norway is known to make products for the active lifestyle, and we are reflecting the Norwegian lifestyle. Norwegian lifestyle is actually very active. We like to go hiking, we go skiing, we are a lot out in the nature, and the wool is perfect for that. But you can also look good in it. It's something you can use with jeans, and you can use it with a beautiful skirt, and you can be like a queen, and then you can go out with jeans with the holes in. It's very, versatile.
After more than a century, Dale's beautiful wool and knitwear is still created by some of the same multi-generational families in the little hydro-powered factory deep in the Norwegian mountains.
It's something you can be proud of, something you like to wear because it's good work behind, and it's also very ethical, and it's environmentally friendly. Everything is really right. It's the best knitwear in the world.
On a recent voyage, Viking Star became an impromptu laboratory at sea when Chairman Thor Hagen and corporate executive chef Anthony Mauboussin took a moment to compare cucumber salad techniques. First, they prepared Mr. Hagen's version, that's also a nod to our Viking heritage.
When I do it, I cold marinated. That makes it crunchy.
The cucumbers are marinated in a mixture of approximately 1/3 vinegar and 2/3 water and a bit of sugar. The result is a taste and consistency Norwegians have loved for generations. After being allowed to set for a bit, it was time for both sides to sample and form initial opinions before plating.
We should have a second cooking. We have to do an A-B. Round 2.
With Norwegian goat cheese slicer back in hand, Chairman Hagen once again rolled up his sleeves to help Chef Mauboussin create the chef's version of the salad. Though mostly the same, there's one key difference. In this preparation, the cucumbers are bathed in a hot mixture rather than cold, and then allowed to soak for the better part of an hour. Even though this was a test, both versions were fully plated. The salmon nestled amid the potatoes and cucumber salad, to be sure we have every detail just right.
And will we have a little bit extra of this on the table? Yes. I think we should. Yes.
At the end of the day, aided perhaps by a bit of sentimentality, the chairman's version emerged victorious.
I win.
The clean, fresh taste of our chairman's favorite dish, salmon with cucumber salad, is one I highly recommend you experience next time you're on board. Nights in Bergen are perfect for exploring. There are plenty of ways to enjoy an evening out here, but you'll want to make sure Femte I andre is on your list. The local watering hole for one of Norway's favorite detectives, it's also one of just a handful of certified aquavit bars, which means they know a great deal about this traditional Scandinavian spirit.
Do we know when aquavit was invented?
Sure. We sent the first bottle to the Archbishop in Trondheim in 1531.
And it was who giving the bottle to whom?
Eskil wrote a nice letter to the Archbishop. He was the last Catholic bishop in Norway.
Uh-huh. And Eskil was who?
He was the king's man in Bergen.
There are now more than 130 different aquavits. We started with one of the mildest, Bergen's aquavit.
This recipe is from the old distillery that we found back in Bergen in 1818. And to make it special, that people know that it's a Bergen aquavit, we have the Håkonshallen and the Rosenkrantztårnet. That's the center of Bergen. Yes. That's the king's place. And here is a 7 gold medal. It's a 7 mountain.
The 7 mountains around Bergen.
Aquavit was once a drink only enjoyed at Christmas, then put back in the freezer for another year. But now it's gathering a loyal following.
This is a little licoricey.
It is, but that was typical for Bergen.
And in order to be Norwegian akvavit, it has to be potatoes.
It has to be by the law.
And potatoes from anywhere?
No, Norwegian potatoes. And it has to be on the barrel, sherry barrel.
Uh-huh. And is that what gives it the color?
Yes.
Aquavit's fragrance and flavor come from the infusion of herbs and spices like anise, dill, and caraway. Aging also plays an important role. For instance, a clear aquavit indicates a short aging time, usually in older casks, which creates a distinct taste.
It's a little bit raw.
Definitely a different aroma.
Different aroma, different taste, and different smell.
One of the most intriguing aquavits is Linje.
This one is sent to Australia and back, and the name of the boat always and behind.
Aha! That's why it's called Linje akvavit.
Yes.
Because it crosses the linje, which is the equator, the line.
Yes, line.
So it crosses the equator twice.
Yes, down and back.
So this is sort of the internationally available Norwegian akvavit.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a rounder, milder.
Even this is stronger.
A delightful variation, Linje double cask aquavit also crosses the equator twice, then is aged in port barrels for 6 months.
That's why the color is darker, is it?
Yes.
Because it takes the color of the cask.
It's completely different.
I'm going to guess it's a bit sweeter.
Yeah, it could be.
This is almost more like a cognac.
Oh, it's lovely.
And my favorite was Hans's own concoction, Bergen coffee, made with aquavit liqueur, syrup, coffee, and a generous helping of fresh cream.
So you mix it?
Yes, it's finished.
But do I drink it just like that?
Drink it like that.
And no whipped cream?
No, always fresh cream.
Always fresh cream. Num. As you say, Norwegian, num.
Yeah.
Hans Bru is one of 5 loyal members of the Society for the Advancement of Bergen's Aquavit. But his passion extends to all forms of the drink.
If you close your eyes and think of akvavit, what is the one word that comes to mind?
Delicious.
What would life be like without akvavit?
A bit of sad life, I think.
Bergen is a fascinating city full of interesting characters and traditions. Let us share with you its many treasures. In the land of the Northern Lights, locals carved out a life amid Norway's imposing landscapes. But they're not the only ones who enjoy this rugged terrain. Goats thrive here too, and archaeologists say they may have roamed these lands for 5,000 years.
And from these goats come my favorite cheese in the entire world, Norwegian gjetost, Norwegian brown goat cheese. Flink pike.
Gjetost, also known as brunost, can be traced back centuries to the high mountain Seter, the alpine pastures where the dairy maids worked in the spring and summer when the men were off to sea. It was here that gjetost was invented in 1863 when Hove started experimenting and stumbled upon the taste that grew into a phenomenon. The treasure for which Norwegians still thank the humble goat. Technically, gjetost is not a cheese at all. Instead of curd, the whey is used, combined with milk and cream. A process of simmering and stirring that takes several hours with the milk sugar caramelizing as the water evaporates. Then it's into the molds, and once cool, the gjetost is ready to eat.
This traditional cheese is from that summer farming up in the mountains. So it was a way to preserve the milk, the source. Also, it was perfect to take away on long voyages. This brown cheese you can keep for years.
Norwegians love gjetost and devour more than 12,000 tons of it every year. Locals believe you haven't really experienced Norway if you haven't feasted on gjetost. So when you're in Norway, remember the contribution these gentle creatures make to one of our favourite foods. But be careful, you may just be tempted to take one of these cute little gjetost makers home with you. Norway is a wonderland of traditions, and we look forward to sharing with you her many treasures. Pretty Bergen is well known for its natural beauty, its historic waterfront, and its tasty seafood. But it's also famous for coffee. Yes, coffee. Norwegians love their coffee, drinking an average 155 litres a year, and their favourite brand is Friele.
Friele is actually one of the oldest companies in the world. It was established in 1799 by Mr. Herman Friele, and we still are #1 coffee producer in Norway.
The entire process from bean to finished coffee takes place right here in Bergen.
This is the green beans that we receive from all around the world. It comes in these burlap sacks, so the coffee can breathe and get the moisture out.
Once in-house, the path of every bean is tracked through roasting and grinding to ensure consistency. Samples of various beans and roasting techniques are tested and retested, and then given the ultimate test, called cupping, where experts use taste and smell to judge the coffees. Slurping spreads the coffee to the back of the tongue, making it easier to assess the sweetness, body and acidity of the coffee.
This tasting is really the heart of the factory. This is where the magic happens. This is where we create the blend to make our special taste. We've been doing this every single day at 11:30 for over 200 years.
Friele coffee always reminds me of Bergen. Even more so since I found the plant manager is the younger brother of my childhood friend Nina. Friele coffee is just one of Norway's many delightful surprises. We look forward to sharing with you more of its hidden treasures. Along Norway's majestic coast, there's long been a tradition of harvesting a living from the ocean, with hardy seafarers leaving safe harbours in the hunt for fish. Today, these waters still hold that precious bounty, and they're ready to challenge those who love the outdoors, albeit in a much more fun and comfortable way. Line fishing is very popular, but hand lining is the technique many locals prefer. It's quick and easy to learn, since all you need is fishing line, lure, and a bit of good luck. In some of Norway's more remote bays, an exotic prize requires a different kind of fishing. The catch, the highly prized red king crab, measuring up to 6 feet between their claws. At water's edge, the traditional tents of the native Sami people are a relaxing place to sample these tasty crustaceans from the deep. The quest for fish can extend into the fjords, where sparkling rivers offer a tranquil setting in which to experience the pristine wilderness, while enjoying the sheer delight of mastering an entirely new skill. Norway's breathtaking waterways are some of the best places I've found to get in touch with life as the locals live it. I hope you'll do as I did and head out to explore the wonders of Norway for yourself. Say Norway and people immediately think of mountains and fjords. But what interests me most is the history and variety of the foods that were created as a result of living here.
So most Norwegian dishes have a historical reason for being.
Yes, you know, in Norway on the high passes they always made milk products or the sour cream, and this is a way to preserve the milk. And as it is with the milk, you know, Norway is a very long country. and it's huge.
Yes.
And you can imagine in the old days you have the population south and the big load of fishes in the north. How can you get it down and still preserve the meat?
And how did they preserve things in the past?
The drying, salting, smoking, graving. Graving means you take the fish or the meat and you spice it with sugar, salt, herbs, and then you leave it with its own juice.
So 5 different ways of preservation.
More or less.
So here on the table we have some of your most typical Norwegian dishes. Where should we start?
Yeah, where do you start? If you now are on a long trip up to a seter, a high pasture, then you always ask for a rømmegrøt. That's the sour cream which you have here. You eat it now with a little bit sugar and cinnamon, and you have then the fruit syrup on the side. And don't forget, when you get to a high seter, how could you keep the meat? You have to salt it, as we said, or you have to dry it. Then you are here.
And this is what we call spekemat.
That's spekemat.
Spekemat.
You have pork meat, fenalor, which is lamb,
Yeah.
and then you have some sausages made of lamb, and in the middle here we have a little bit elk.
And then you have the typical flatbread.
Of course, to this as well you eat this rømmegrøt. The Norwegians, they don't eat twice a day hot meal. They only eat once in the evening. During the day they had smørbrød or matpakke, and this is the type smørbrød.
And these are open-faced.
That's open-faced, and the smørbrød, you have to have a bread. You can have white or you have the rye bread, and then you have the ingredients on top with a little bit salad. Just back that smoked salmon, traditionally as well, always with a little bit scrambled egg.
Yeah.
And then it's shrimps with mayonnaise.
So that's the easy way of eating the delicious Norwegian shrimp.
And that's a traditional way. So you can see that all over the coastline in Norway. You see that's like snacks you eat, shrimps, fresh shrimps from the sea. And it's a little bit more difficult to eat, but you have to learn it. You take the shrimps like that. Take the head off, and of course you have then to get the goodies out here.
The brain.
Yeah, the brain. And then it's the roe.
Yeah.
You just suck it up.
Yeah.
And then it's to peel them.
And then you layer your own smørbrød. Yes. Oh, you just eat them, right?
You lay them like that.
Yeah. With a bit of mayonnaise.
Yeah. Of course, as it was also in the old days with all the fish you had, you made the fish cakes. Fish cakes made of white fish is the best, and root vegetables. It's only celery and carrots, and a little bit lemon on it and salt.
And boiled potatoes, of course.
Boiled potatoes. And then you have the opposite, that's then the meatballs. Kjøttkake. Kjøttkake is a very, very old tradition. You eat the kjøttkake in Norway during the summer with what we call a cabbage stew, and during the winter with a pea stew. Our meatballs are made with a blend of beef and elk, and then you have a little bit of pork fat that it gets juicy meatballs. And that's the apple cake, made with puff pastry dough and then a lot of real cream.
So you compensate. You don't have a lot of the dough, which is great. You have more apple, but then you put the calories in the real cream.
Yes, it has to be like that.
Yeah.
Norway is filled with tasty delights. We look forward to sharing with you her many food secrets. Bergen's coastal location makes it a great place to enjoy seafood. When you're here in Norway, there's one thing you must do, and that's peel shrimp.
Today, we're extremely privileged to have the mayor of Bergen give us a little course on how to peel shrimp. Now, in Norway, we have different styles, and I'm curious to see if the mayor's shrimp peeling style is the same as mine.
I doubt it, but you know, I think we are doing it in the way we think it's the easiest way. The main thing is that you get the shell out and away, and then can eat the wonderful shrimp in it. That is what is important.
So these shrimp are from Norwegian shrimp?
Yes, absolutely, from out on the fjords or the sea. I am going to peel the middle first. And I just take out the middle and let it go. And then I take the head and put it away. And then I have the bottom left. and I press a little down here and just peel it off. And there you have a very clean shrimp, and you're getting rid of that one. You have to have the shrimp on bread.
White bread.
Always. Nothing else when you have shrimp.
You do it exactly opposite to how I do it.
There you are.
Yeah. So I start at the head, and I have a step that you don't have, because I love the butter or the brain. So I take the brain out, which is delicious. In fact, it's the best part of the shrimp in my book, so you're missing out. I put my peel on my plate, because I'm not as neat as you are. Then I do the belly.
At least you take the bottom at last.
At last, and I
Yeah.
do the same pinch.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I think mine is faster than yours, but perhaps not as elegant.
But you know, it is not about how fast or how elegant. It is enjoying together with friends and having all the time.
Yes. The objective is to create a shrimp open-faced sandwich.
Yes. It takes some time, depends on how big the bread is. This bread is small compared to what we used to, but it's much easier to eat elegantly. Then I think we have to have some lemon on it. I've already put on the mayonnaise. And I'm using the lemon.
I actually like it with just mayonnaise as well. The shrimp,
so good.
Yeah. It's the texture and the taste of
And
the
you
shrimp
know, now
itself.
I'm very polite because I have a lot of mayonnaise on it when I do it at home alone.
Oh, do you really?
Don't tell anyone.
And it has to be real mayonnaise,
Yes.
right? None of that fake,
Oh, no
low
fake
calorie.
ones. No, we don't hate that.
This is a tall piece of bread.
This is about making the good sounds. Oh,
Yeah, that is good.
and the fresh ones. Oh, and then it's very good with the water with lemon in, because you don't smell like a shrimp. The shrimp, the mayonnaise, the citrus, and a good wine.
Yes.
That's perfect
a
combination.
Perfect Norwegian summer.
It is.
Yeah.
And you know, with all this, we also have a very nice white wine. That is very important. And as often as possible, we say skål.
Skål.
And we look each other in the eye to be personal and to know that you are here and I am here. Skål.
Skål. And that's a very Norwegian tradition, right? Even if you're 2 or 10 people around the table?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We do it as often as we can, also because it gives us the possibility to get wine.
Yes.
But because we want to see each other when we are together around the table.
Yeah, it's very respectful. And then there's another very typical Norwegian thing to do, and that's at the end of the meal.
Yes.
We all say,
Tusen takk for maten.
Which means,
1,000 thanks for the food.
Bergen is a delightful city that might just make your favourites list. We look forward to sharing with you its many treasures and traditions. Norway has more than 25,000 kilometres of coastline, and nestled amid its craggy shores is one of the country's most important industries after oil and gas: aquaculture.
We have a hatchery just out in the fjord here, where they come from. And in the hatchery, they are in fresh water all the time, swimming in basins,
On
circular basins on land, yes. And they're swimming like this all the time for about 1.5 years. And suddenly they change their swimming behavior. They start swimming in all directions and also change a little color. And then we know that they are ready for sea.
The young salmon then spend another 1.5 years feeding in seawater pens designed to rear healthy fish.
First of all, not having too many fish in the cages. That's number one. And also having clean nets, using no chemicals.
These are ideal conditions for salmon. And Norway's North Atlantic salmon stocks are especially suited to them, since their origin can be traced back to wild salmon caught in Norwegian rivers long ago. In these cold, crystal-clear waters, the salmon thrive. So much so that each year more than 1.3 million tons are harvested and exported to 130 countries from these quiet bays.
We have fresh water coming down from the mountains. That's very important, together with a good current, so they have to work a bit, and then they get very good flesh.
Norway is a wonderfully diverse country with much to discover. We look forward to sharing with you more of our homeland.